as much as you can go organic, phenomenal. There are also protective things we can do, like nourishing our microbiome with good, healthy fiber, making sure we're having healthy bowel movements regularly. These are things that help our bodies to eliminate or keep our estrogen levels healthy and eliminate excess estrogen. And I'm going to say one that's probably not going to make me super popular, but interestingly, alcohol acts as an endocrine disruptor, the kind we drink. So minimizing alcohol to absolutely no more than 1 to 3 drinks a week, and a measured poured, like this is how many ounces should be in this drink, not just a pour, because most pours are probably 1.5 or 2 drinks. That can be hugely protective and also great for our sleep and our hormones and how we feel, our mood, all the things.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. Our bodies are innately wise, and that includes the ways our hormones work. For example, estrogen protects our brains, oxytocin helps us bond with loved ones, cortisol helps us get up in the morning, thyroid regulates our metabolism. But that's when our hormones are working in an optimal state. When they're not working is when we have problems like heavy periods, insomnia, night sweats, infertility, and moodiness. Today's podcast guest explains how it's not your fault when your hormones seem to be working against you, and she shares how you can restore your hormonal intelligence. My guest is Dr. Aviva Romm, who is a midwife and herbalist, and she's also a Yale-trained MD and board-certified family physician with specialties in integrative gynecology, obstetrics, and pediatrics. She's author of multiple books, including her recent New York Times bestseller, Hormone Intelligence, and she is mother of 4 and grandmother of 2. Today, we're exploring the impact of the world we live in on women's hormones and health, and what we can do to positively impact our ecosystem, including what and when we eat, our mindset, and reducing certain toxins around us. This and much more on today's episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast. Dr. Aviva, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Trevor, it's nice to be back and see your beautiful face again. It's been a minute.
Yes, I know. And you wrote the foreword for my first book, Clean Skin from Within.
Your first book, but it's gorgeous. That book.
Yeah.
One of these epic, beautiful production books.
Thank you. And
you're welcome.
Beautiful foreword for it. So
thank you for letting me do that.
Yeah, of course. So we really resonate in our message. And I know you talk a lot about hormones, and it's what we talk a lot about on the podcast. And what I think is interesting the reason why we talk so much about it is because it's more of a problem than it used to be. More and more women are struggling with hormonal issues. And is that because we're speaking out about it more, or is it really a problem?
I think it's a bunch of things. I think that we, as women, talk about our hormones partly because we feel so much of what's going on, right? Like I'm sure even 100 years ago, our grandmothers weren't like, oh yeah, let me get my period. I can't wait. It was like, okay, that's happening. But they didn't talk about it because it was so taboo, right? It was just so off the table to have the conversation. The only thing I remember as a kid, well, my mom was pretty open. So she'd be like, can you grab me a tampon? And my grandmother, I remember hearing the term change of life, but that was basically it. But now I think, yes, we are more open about talking about periods. Like period was said at the Academy Awards, which was amazing, right? We have people say vagina on television and radio shows. So we can talk about it more. So that's beautiful. And that's great. And talking about when we're having problems also helps us to not feel alone, to feel normalized. We're making more noise about it. So hopefully there'll be more research. But yes, women are experiencing higher rates of hormonal, and not just hormonal, but interrelated problems like autoimmune conditions, which can be triggered by hormonal shifts. So endometriosis, uterine fibroids. If you go back, 1,000 years into some of the early botanical and medical literature, you can find things that clearly tell us that women were having heavy bleeding at a certain age, right? Or menstrual cycles may have caused pain. And there've always been therapies for these things, but they're definitely escalated now. 1 in 8 women, endometriosis, PCOS, 1 in 8 women, a thyroid problem in her life, the rates of fertility treatments going up, thyroid problems. And again, as I mentioned, autoimmune conditions, which we don't really think of as hormonal, we think about as rheumatologic. But for women who are going through postpartum, women who are going through menopause, these are big times in our life when those drops in hormones can actually trigger autoimmune conditions too. And those are absolutely escalating, and mostly for women.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you think that's happening?
I think right now we live in a time where there's a perfect storm of factors that are affecting all of us. And even those of us who try to live the healthiest, clean and green lives, if anyone can see me, I'm doing air quotes here around that. But we're still exposed to 80,000 environmental chemicals that show up in our food, in our soil, in our water. We put our food into plastic storage containers, or maybe we don't now, but our mothers unknowingly, or fathers maybe unknowingly did when we were babies. We have chronic exposure to stress, which is actually an environmental toxin, trauma, lack of great sleep. And the list kind of goes on. And then, of course, the sort of pièce de resistance of low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, is also standard American diet, which the acronym, I know this is a little dated, but is sad, right? That's standard American diet. And even women who are trying to eat well, our food nutritional quality isn't necessarily what it was. And this is not like me saying, oh, our food nutritional quality isn't as good. There's quantified data from the US and the UK showing that, for example, if I eat an orange now, it has the equivalent of I'd have to eat 8 oranges to get the vitamin C that my great grandmother might have gotten from an orange. So times have changed. We're really under a lot of stress, I think. Social media has escalated that. We're skipping meals. We're staying up late. We're eating close to bedtime. And it's a man's world, right? James Brown said it. It's a man's world. And I don't mean that men should own the world, but the way that our modern lifestyle is created with our work schedules, and in the US, just complete lack of taking vacations. We're the only country in the world where people don't even take all their paid vacation. The number of people working night shifts is really significant. And of those people, it's also mostly women. So the way the world is set up isn't really harmonious for us to get adequate sleep, to take a day off if we are a little bit premenstrual and feel it and we need to nourish ourselves, to shift our demands during postpartum that are on us, or as we're going through menopause or other life cycles. So I think that really does have an impact on us too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk some more about that. I want to talk about the environmental toxin exposures as well. Let's talk about our lifestyle and living in a man's world. How do we adjust to that? What do we do about that? Obviously just trying to fit into the man's world is not working for most women. And we're seeing that right in our practices with women getting complete burnout, and our systems are just different. Our hormones are different. We are made differently.
And it's easy to say, oh, just hit pause more and be good to yourself and don't be part of the hustle. But if a woman is working in a corporate environment, it doesn't actually work that way. Or if a woman is, I've had many, many patients who are in environments like that, and they're trying to do extended breastfeeding. And by extended, I mean past their postpartum leave that they could afford to take of 3 months. And you just watch their milk supply go down as they're trying to keep up with the demands. But then it's getting a little better in some environments, but if they don't, then the next person who isn't breastfeeding, male or female, is right there to pick up the slack and the extra hours. So I think we have to find a balance between the reality and really it's not a man's world. It's just men like us to think that, but there's so many of the ways that it's constructed are an obstacle for us. So finding those ways that we can be good to ourselves and nourish ourselves and reframe our approach to our inner conversation, right? So that when we are taking downtime, we're not still checking our phone for 50 messages. We say, okay, I deserve an hour break right now, and really take that. We can say that we're going to sleep at 10:30 if we have to wake up at 5:30 so that we're getting that 7 hours of sleep. And one thing that we can be relatively uncompromising on is keeping our blood sugar steady. And I think that is one of the biggest disruptors, one of the biggest disruptors that we have more control over, right? You can't fully control what's in your water, food, and soil, even eating organic. But you do have more control over cosmetics and body products. You do have more control over the food you eat and how you choose to regulate, right, your hours of eating so you're not skipping meals. And that's just a huge one, I think, and not dipping so heavily into the sugar. And I'm not against sugar per se, but in terms of the inflammation it causes, the blood sugar roller coaster, and all of that acts as kind of its own form of toxin to our hormones.
Yeah.
I call this whole way of thinking, by the way, total ecosystem medicine. We look at it, some people say root causes, but when I'm with a patient, or when I'm creating an online program or a book, what are all of the points in the ecosystem, both internally, our microbiome? We didn't talk about that, but the average American, by the time he or she reaches the age of 18, has had on average 20 rounds, not 20 doses, but 20 rounds of antibiotics prescribed and usually taken. And then women in their 20s, because of more frequent urinary tract infections, often take far more, up to 10 more rounds. And that disruption of the microbiome ecosystem can have a huge impact on hormones. So I like to look at what is our internal ecosystem, what is our external ecosystem, where do those meet with us in the middle, kind of a Venn diagram, and what can we do something about without also adding so much more stress to our lives?
That's a good point, because all of this could be super stressful. You can get
Right.
stressed out by trying to get a good night's sleep. You can get stressed out by going, when am I going to get to the grocery store and get healthy food? Is there a
Exactly.
farmer's market in my area? And how do I find out? And
Right. And I see a lot of especially men in the wellness and health space. They're like, oh, just spend more time in your kitchen. I'm like, that's easy for you to say because you're either single with no kids at home, or your partner's actually shopping and cooking and batch cooking. But there are ways that we can think ahead, but it takes more work. It does. It takes more work. I think of it as a pay now, pay later situation though, because as a physician who has spent many hours working in hospitals, paying later with things like diabetes and heart disease, or even paying with autoimmune conditions. And I'm not saying everything is preventable either. We live in a complex world, but it is worth it if you can really start to think about, okay, how can I batch cook? Can I turn Netflix off at 9:30 so that I'm brushing my teeth and doing all the things by 10 and then reading a book until 10:30 instead of getting in that one more episode and then, with the 2 glasses of wine that you drink and dropping into bed. So it's personal choices that we can make that can offset or prevent a lot of these bigger picture problems. And the other thing is some women have these problems before they had any say so, many, right? Like many young women with endometriosis in their 20s or horrible period pain in their teens. It's not like they did all these things on purpose and knew and now have these problems. So it's also really important. This is not about blaming women or women's choices. There are a lot of factors. So it's really just identifying the ones that we can do something about that can make a difference.
right. I know. I think with a lot of us who feel like this need for perfectionism, we got to do it all because
So been there.
yeah, right. We're working and we're taking care of the family and we're cooking and cleaning and we're shopping and we're doing all these things. And I think even if you can afford to get help, you still feel like, well, I can do it better. I
Yeah.
can if I could just do it, then, and I sometimes I have to catch myself with my kids sometimes of just doing things for them. Be like,
Yeah.
no, you still live at home. You can still you can help out. And my youngest is 16, so she certainly can help out. And then when my others come and visit or stay for prolonged periods of time, they can contribute as well.
I started keeping a panda planner. I have no association with the panda company, but it's just a planner. And so you write out your week's worth of stuff. And then each day you write what you have going on that day and you put it into a planner. And it's been really helpful for me because we all know that feeling, right? Like I'm going to get these 15 things done today. And then you get through 3 and the day is over. And now you're beating yourself up because you have to push them tomorrow and you've already got 8 things scheduled for tomorrow. And you kind of feel like a failure and like you're not good enough and you're not keeping up with it. So I've started doing keeping this planner. So I put fewer things on each day because now I've been doing it long enough to say, okay, you've been moving 5 things forward every day for like 2 weeks. Something's wrong there, Aviva. But the other thing is I actually write little notes to myself now, which is like, if you could get this done today, awesome. But if not, it's okay. You can do it another day. Like I put that in my planner. Just giving myself permission is really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I realize we don't have to do it all and we don't have to do it perfectly and we can ask for
I'm going
help.
to do it all today.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to talking some more about environmental toxins.
Yeah.
Because I know you and I talk a lot about this and we have information in our books about it, but this is a really important topic. I agree that a lot of the things that we're seeing with hormonal imbalances is, we're seeing a lot of that come from environmental toxins and the endocrine disrupting chemicals. So what are the things that you're finding are showing up with you or the people that you work with your patients that we can do things about?
Yeah. So endocrine disrupting chemicals can affect our estrogen levels, our progesterone, our testosterone, our thyroid, and indirectly by causing inflammation and some other things they do can also affect cortisol. They can disrupt our microbiome. The problem is there aren't great tests that are easily accessible and reliable to even me as a physician. A lot of the tests looking for certain endocrine disruptors are more at the clinical studies level. So we kind of have to look at the research and say, we know that PFAs, we know that phthalates, we know that any number of these different endocrine disruptors, and they're heavy metals too, those act as endocrine disruptors, but those can also cause neurologic problems in our environment. And the naysayers and the critics are like, yeah, but they're in parts per trillion. Well, so are most of our hormones, right? They're parts per million, parts per trillion. They're tiny, tiny little, like the equivalent of a drop of blue dye in an Olympic-sized swimming pool for some of these chemicals. And so people are like, well, like that's hardly anything, but so are our hormones. They're tiny, tiny measures. And we know from reams of studies. I mean, I could print out just off the surface studies that would literally go from floor to ceiling in my office. I have 9-foot ceilings, right? I could do that many times. There are so many studies, good studies published in good medical journals like toxicology that absolutely link these environmental disrupting chemicals to Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, infertility, diabetes, neurologic problems, preeclampsia, preterm labor, obesity, and the list goes on. And those are just the big things, right? Autoimmune conditions. And so what I do in my practice is because I can't easily and reproducibly, like reliably measure, oh, let me get her PFA level, her PFO. What am I looking for here? Let me get her phthalate level. What am I looking for here? And it's not just those individual chemicals, but they're stored in places in our body. They're stored in our bones, in our muscle, in our fat. So even just checking blood levels doesn't necessarily indicate the body burden. So I start with all the things that my patients can shift in their life. And at first, it can sound really overwhelming when we just talk about it like this, but you can pace it out, right? Like you can go into your bathroom and open up your cosmetics drawer or container, whatever, however you keep your beautiful makeup, and look at the ingredients. There are certain ingredients that you can look for. You can also go to the environmental working group website. It's just ewg.org. They have a totally free database called Skin Deep. You can look up the name of the product that's in your hand and you can look it up. And they have, I think, hundreds of thousands of products now, at least 100,000. And it'll give it a rating. Is this a 1 because it's really actually pretty environmentally and human safe, or is it a 4 or a 6? And then you decide, okay, well, how much am I going to absorb from my mascara, right? I just love this mascara. I'm not letting go of this mascara, but my lipstick, I'm licking it off all day. Or my foundation, I'm putting that all over my face, or my shampoo or my soap. Or you can go to websites like mine or yours where we weigh in on these different types of things, or find the great cosmetics online vendors that sell body products and all the beautiful things. And they don't have to be crazy expensive, and we don't need as much as we think we need. And also, I'm going to reiterate, it's pay now or pay later. So looking at those things that are just in your bathroom, start with your things that go all over your body or on large areas of your body. Then think about what is in your kitchen. So there have been studies looking at just going from using plastic cups and plastic water bottles in teenagers, measuring their phthalate levels. Phthalates are a chemical that's used to soften plastic. So they're in a lot of products that we use. They used to be in baby pacifiers. They're in a lot of soft plastic things. So when we have teenage girls in this one study go off of these products, or just not using containers that, you're drinking your water out of, you can watch their blood phthalate levels go down in these studies in a few weeks. So I start with, what are we putting our food in? And just keep it out of plastic. Basically, don't have plastic storage containers in your kitchen, and get rid of any non-stick pans, unless they're the newer, really cool ceramic ones. Those might be fine, but anything that's Teflon or Teflon-like really has to go, because these things are not stable. They're not stuck in there, never to come out. They do leach out, and this is measurable in our food. So start with cosmetics, body products, go to what your food is. You can do it in the opposite order. Another really low-hanging fruit is look at your household cleaning products. Anything that is synthetically scented. And a lot of things, even if they say natural and organic, they don't have to declare the scent. So the scent may still be synthetic. So you can't be sure. So go for non-scented, or ones that you can really say, this says this is a natural, organically scented, organic essential oil, and switch to simpler cleaning products. And again, there are tons of companies out there now. Those phthalates that are in plastics, they also are in synthetic scent. And when we breathe them in, they still bind to our estrogen receptors. When we're handling them for cleaning, we're still touching them. So I would say body products, food storage containers, household cleaning products, great places to start. As an extension of what's in your kitchen, looking at your food is really important. And, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that those herbicides and pesticides that are in our food are endocrine disruptors, and we are ingesting them with our food. So as much as you can go organic, phenomenal. There are also protective things we can do, like nourishing our microbiome with good, healthy fiber, making sure we're having healthy bowel movements regularly. These are things that help our bodies to eliminate or keep our estrogen levels healthy and eliminate excess estrogen. And I'm going to say one that's probably not going to make me super popular, but interestingly, alcohol acts as an endocrine disruptor, the kind we drink. So minimizing alcohol to absolutely no more than 1 to 3 drinks a week, and a measured poured, like, this is how many ounces should be in this drink, not just a pour, because most pours are probably 1.5 or 2 drinks. That can be hugely protective and also great for our sleep and our hormones and how we feel, our mood, all the things. So those are just a few.
Thank you. Those are all fantastic. And the last one you talked about, alcohol, it's an interesting one, because I'm sure you've noticed with your patients, if they stop that every night glass of wine, they sleep better. They may notice less hot flashes and night sweats too.
Yep,
and so
absolutely.
Still all the time, every time I mention that, women are always surprised to hear that. Oh,
yeah,
maybe that's why I'm having, all these hot flashes and night sweats,
Yeah.
especially on the
Yeah,
week.
the Canadian government just issued a new guideline around alcohol, and they basically said the only alcohol that's healthy to drink is the amount is not. Like there is actually no healthy amount to drink, but it doesn't mean you have to be a teetotaler. It just means definitely don't binge drink. Definitely don't drink daily or regularly. And if you can keep it to no more than three, ideally one or less, and not every week. Because, I mean, not to be scary either, but studies are very clear that even just 1 to 3 drinks of alcohol a week is a risk factor for developing breast cancer, even if you don't have a family history. So, just things to think about and choices to make.
Yeah. And I think it's still good to give permission for people not to drink at all. Like I stopped drinking alcohol
Exactly.
a year and a half ago. I haven't had any alcohol in a year and a
Yeah.
half. And I don't miss it. I love it. I feel
No, I don't either. And I've never been a significant drinker either. But even if I have any alcohol and I'm not having it, whew, I really, really notice it. And it's amazing. My best friend, she decided to stop drinking a year ago, January. And what she found was her mood improved, her relaxation got better, her sleep got better. She lost a bunch of weight, which was one of her goals. Partly she was waking up in the morning with the energy to exercise, her cognitive function, just like everything. And I see this in my patients all the time, but seeing it in my bestie was just like so dramatic, you know?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I grew up with my dad was a winemaker
Oh,
and
wow.
with, it was very social thing. And so, I think a lot of times it's become such a social thing that
Yeah.
we forget that we actually don't have to drink alcohol. And I also think that as we get older, we just don't really
Don't
process
tolerate
it
it.
well.
No.
It is a toxic substance and our body converts it into, a toxic chemical. So
Exactly. And then all of the energy that our body takes to do that is also using up precious nutrients and things like N-acetylcysteine that could also be helping to keep the environmental toxins lower or detoxified also. So I love that you say that. I always feel a little hesitant because I was like, people are going to, this is when I turned Aviva off when she said no alcohol. And I'm not saying no, but I do love the idea of just saying, I'm giving you support and permission to be socially cool in a different way.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
a lot of people too have so much social anxiety and they find that having a drink relaxes them. So finding other ways to manage our social anxiety is really important. And if you are going to have a drink, that's one of the things I talk about in I did a 2-part podcast on alcohol. Like there are ways to have, have that 1.5 ounces of alcohol split over 2 drinks if you're going to, and sip it really slowly and eat food. So it's not that it's not toxic anymore, but at least it's not hitting our blood sugar so hard and hitting our hormones so hard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wherever people are in their journey, it's,
Yep,
know their options.
exactly.
What are some of the things that we can do to help support detoxification? Because of course, reducing our exposure to these is crucial.
Hmm. Yeah.
But what else can we be doing to kind of get, our system, our body working optimally?
Yeah. So, for everyone listening, when Trevor and I are talking about detoxification, we're not talking about like, how do you now do a detox? But our body, particularly our liver and our digestive system, are phenomenal at taking these environmental chemicals and trying to break them down so we can eliminate them and not store them or have them circulating. I think there are 2 problems. One is that we are overloaded. We're getting exposed to an insane number of different environmental toxins all the time. So far more than our body ancestrally was and evolutionarily was prepared to deal with. But 2, as I mentioned, when you mentioned alcohol, and I was saying this about using up precious nutrients, our diets are also devoid of the nutrients that help our bodies do these natural detoxification processes. So our bodies are meant to detoxify, right? It's our ancestors 10,000 years ago could try a berry and not necessarily just drop dead from it unless it was like something really bad because their body knew how to process those toxins. But our ancestors were also getting an enormous amount of phytochemicals, right? Plant-based chemicals from their diets. We can still do that. So one of the things I really deeply encourage is really getting, and this is going to sound like a lot, but if you think about it, it's not 8 to 10 servings of fruits and or vegetables a day and 30 different types over the course of a week. Again, it's going to sound like a lot, right? But if you have breakfast and you have a little bit of arugula and maybe some half an orange or some berries, that's 2 servings. Then if you have a salad for lunch and you have some, let's say romaine lettuce and some grated carrot and some red pepper, and you put in some chopped red onion and a little bit of herbs, that's 5 servings, right? Then maybe you have a green drink at some point. That can be 5 more servings. And then you have 2 servings of veggies. Maybe you have some broccoli and some sweet potato for dinner. You've done it. And then you just vary those over and you don't have to be religious about like 8 or 10 every day and 30 every week. But we know that that provides this foundation level of these plant-based chemicals and also vitamins and minerals that help our liver do the job our liver needs to do. And that provides the fiber that keeps us eliminating these things through our gut. Also make sure that we're getting legumes, good quality oils, not bad quality. So olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, these all, it's really basic, you know, and it's funny because people will go to functional medicine practitioners or they'll come to me and they'll expect me to do like thousands of dollars worth of tests. And I'm kind of like, but at the end of the day, I'm going to say the same thing. So how about saving the money on the tests and put your money into maybe some really nice containers for organizing your grains or something beautiful for your kitchen, like, you know, some dishes and utensils that are going to make you enjoy eating more or save it, you know, save the money. And we really don't need a lot of supplements either. Now, sometimes somebody has something going on, right? They do have a medical condition, and then we're trying to bump them up a little with maybe N-acetylcysteine or some magnesium or some flavonoids, and we might use some extra nutrients in the form of supplements, but we can really do it with our eating. The other thing that's really important is sleep. And we think about sleep for mind and cognition, but our body has a circadian rhythm. And that circadian rhythm depends on us getting adequate sleep when it's dark. And if our circadian rhythm is disrupted, our detoxification processes can be out of alignment. Our gut elimination can be out of alignment. So sleep to me is one of the great kind of harmonizers. Sleep also helps us detoxify actually what's going on in the byproducts that we produce all day in our brain. So it is actually healthy for brain health too.
Great. Awesome.
And adequate water. So many of us, myself included, are underhydrators. Yes. Cheers.
Cheers to water.
We're such underhydrators as women, and staying hydrated is really important for cellular health and for detoxification and for brain health.
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. You're always a wealth of information.
Aww.
So I know you have a bunch of books, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
And your most recent one is Hormone Intelligence. I love that title.
Thank you.
What inspired you to book titles are so fascinating, especially if you've written a book, like how you come up with the book title. How did you come up with that one?
Well, I started out with the book being called Hormone Ecology, all one word. And the E at the end of hormone was the capital E for ecology. And it was kind of the North Star of what I was writing about. And at the end of the day, my editor, who was the senior VP at Harper One, who's been doing this for 20 years, said, it's not an easily searchable word because it's made up. So how about you make hormone ecology like the premise, and what can you think of for a title? And so the second chapter, I think, of the book was originally Hormone Intelligence. And it was about the wisdom of our body. And hormone wisdom felt a little softer than I wanted, even though I'm a deep believer in our inner wisdom. I wanted something that really talked about the evolutionary intelligence of our bodies and our hormones and how what's happening now may kind of impact that. Yeah. But that even within that, the symptoms we have, the sixth vital sign, as it's known, that show up are part of that biological intelligence that give us that information. So I said hormone intelligence to my publisher and his assistant at the time, who was my editor, and she's a phenomenal young woman. And they were both like, that just says so much.
Yeah.
And so that became the title.
Yeah.
But it really is the abiding kind of principle of just connecting back to, it is that wisdom, but it is also this hormonal blueprint that is very intelligent. And we're intelligent. It gives us, there are so many nuances. It gives us a level of information about ourselves as well that provides intelligence too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, where can people get a copy of your books and that, including that one, and where can they learn more about you?
So my books, anywhere you love buying books, and if you can go to an independent bookseller, all the better. If you have one in your community, they can always use our purchases, but you can get it anywhere. And same with all of my books. And you can learn about my books on my website, where you can also find tons of free articles. I love creating content, and you'll find my podcast over there on health. That's avivaromm.com. And I also hang out on Instagram. I'm just getting started on TikTok, but Instagram is a great place to reach me in the comments. And that's just Dr. Aviva.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dr. Aviva, for coming on and sharing your
Thanks
wisdom.
for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast, be sure to share it with the women in your life and rate and review the show. And to learn all about balancing your hormones, join us for the Hormones, Health, and Harmony 9-part documentary series at hormoneseries.com.